today we have gathered on a Saturday morning and we have gathered for a webinar. So, welcome everyone. And in this webinar, basically, you'll get to know a lot of insights, into the management required for creating impacts, how's the development management is actually different from business administration for the public policy. And the last and not the least is the knowledge. So you'll get to know, you'll get in, touch with a lot of touch base with the knowledge and skills required for effective development management. So adding on to this, there's a lot of practical ideas that we'll be, getting to equipped with and to accelerate your careers into the social development work across Samaj, Sarkar, and Bazaar. So we have, with us today, Ravi Sridharan. So Ravi Sridharan quit his corporate career and switched to the social sector in 2011, joining Azim Premji Foundation, where he was the head of education, leadership, and management. He worked in the corporate sector for 24 years at HSBC, where he was the regional marketing head for Middle East and Africa, head of customer products for Asia Pacific, consumer banking head of Indonesia, CEO and president director of Bank Econom, a local bank in Indonesia that was acquired by HSBC. Ravi has an MBA from IIM Ahmedabad and a BTech from IIT BHU. I would like to ask Ravi to start the session. Over to you, Ravi. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sakshi. Good morning to everybody. It was a very generous introduction, Sakshi, but thank you for that. I can see there are still people joining, but I suppose we should start, isn't it?
Yes.
And will people be able to put comments on the chat while the session is on? I think they can, right? If that's the case, I just want to try if it works. Can I request whoever is on the call to just type your names in the chat, because then at least I get a sense of whether this is working. Yeah, thanks Ajinkya, thanks Nick. Deepak. Any others not able to type? Or do we have only 3? I'm sure we have more than 3. Okay, there's Kim. Vikas, Varsha. Great. So this works. I suppose in this format, you won't be able to talk. So we'll use the chat and maybe we'll use some polls, just to get a sense of, how you're feeling and things like that. But I suppose you can ask questions, and I do want this to be more interactive. Great. So people can talk, right? So that's great. So what we'll do is I'll talk for about, I don't know, maybe 15, 20, 25 minutes or something like that. But then want to spend a lot of time, picking your questions, because I'll also add a lot more when you start asking your questions. Because if I go on speaking for an hour and a half, I have a just sneaky feeling that all of you will fall asleep and get bored of what's going on. So if you're all okay with that, then that's what I'm going to do. You can post your questions in the chat even as I'm speaking, some of which I'll pick up while I'm speaking itself. And if not, for sure, we'll pick it up once I finish, my monologue of about 15, 20 minutes, 25 minutes on the outside. And then we'll get into a lot more of discussions and question and answers and things like that. So with that, I'm just trying to think whether we can also try some polls just to get some feedback from you. Um, so maybe the first poll we can try is just to hear from all of you, whether you're from a corporate background, a social sector background, or if you're a student. And I'm just wondering if our web admin can generate a poll. There are some questions there for you. How many of you are from the social sector, the corporate sector, or if you're students, or none of the above? How many of you know of development management, the idea of development management? Are you like, have you heard about it? You know about it? You know more or less what it does, or you've not heard about it, or you have some idea, you've heard of that word at least, but don't know much about it. And, you know, what is the ISDM? Have you heard of ISDM or not? So if you can just vote on that, I'd love to see what your backgrounds are. Just do the first three. How do we see the results of this poll?
I will present it.
I see. Okay.
But there are few people who have not responded yet, so I'm waiting.
Sure, sure, sure. Ah, there are some indications. So most of you are from the social sector. There's a student. How many of you know of development management? Mostly no and somewhat. How many of you know of ISDM? Two-thirds of you know, and one-third you don't know. You've answered the last question also. NGOs, CSR, for-profit, research, government. Great. Thank you for responding to those questions. Also helped me understand your profile so I can talk, keeping that in mind. So if one, looks back and, you're all what I would call youth, I'm guessing, in that sort of an age bracket. And you probably know that India has one of the highest youth populations in the world. You probably know that the country is a very young country because of a large number of people who are below the age of 35. And it's a bubble. So that bubble is going through in a population. As you age, that group will keep going up. The newer numbers that are coming will be actually lesser. So this is a bubble that will go on for the next, so this currently it's very young. And once people of your age reach the age of 70, then the population table will start looking like that, where there are more older people and things like that. And you probably know that India's population growth has reached an average fertility rate of 2.1 per woman. That means that the population will now more or less remain flat going forward. But given that this huge youth are in the country, I mean, there are a lot of challenges that the country faces, but I'm just trying to think what are the big challenges that the youth of this country face. And I'm just picking a few things off my head. For example, we have something like 13 million youth who are coming into the job market every year. So every year, 13 million new people are coming into the job market. And this 13 million will keep coming into the job market for the next at least 15 years. Now, while this 13 million people are coming into the job market, the new jobs that we are creating, because you need new jobs for these people, is roughly about 250,000. So 13 million people coming into job market, but new jobs are only 250,000, which means there are no jobs for a huge section of the youth who are coming into the job market. And that's a big challenge. I mean, youth obviously want to be, productive and economically generative and so on and so forth. So that's a big challenge. So obviously, as a country, we need to solve that problem. We need to figure out how do we translate the economic growth. And you probably know that India is growing at one of the fastest growth rates in the world. And every now and then you'll read the news item which says we have overtaken Germany, we have overtaken UK, and now we are the third largest economy in the world. So we have to translate that economy into jobs, so jobs become very important. The second one, as I think about it, is, and many of you might have also faced it, our education system is really, really struggling. And you would have seen reports which say that, children who are at grade 5 are not able to do grade 1 level arithmetic, reading, and things like that, which means what's happening? The youth are coming through an education system which is letting them down, which is not really preparing them well. You can't blame the students for that achievement levels. You have to blame the system for that, right? And the system is not preparing these youngsters and students to reach that level and, be empowered adults who can participate in the nation's economic progress, who can participate in the nation's future directions it wants to take, can participate in issues ranging from economics to politics to climate to whatever else. But we have an education system that's crumbling. So you don't have jobs, people are not being prepared well to, get into, potential job markets and things like that. And of course, there's so much inequality in our country, right? I mean, you walk on the roads of Bombay, Bangalore, Delhi, right from one side of the road, there'll be the slums of people working in the flats on the other side, which probably have a swimming pool on every floor, while in the slum, there is no drinking water available even in the house, and they'll have to go and, pick water from the nalas and, open sources and things like that. So that inequality also affects the youth a lot, because you get quite upset about why should the world be so unfair? Why shouldn't everybody have similar opportunities and things like that? And the other thing that I find a lot of youth who come and talk to me is on issues of climate change. I genuinely think that my generation and maybe one or two generations before mine have really done a huge lot of damage to the planet, to the water systems, I mean, in India itself, you keep reading news of whether it is in the cities, you hear about flooding and people dying. Even just last week in Kolkata, there was huge flooding. And the first thing you heard was 8 people had died of electrocution within 3 hours. And that's horrible. I mean, that's a life lost. Or if you go into the villages, you hear about landslides. Or if you go into agriculture areas, the rainfalls have become so unpredictable. The availability of fresh water is come to very dangerously low levels. So a lot of youth are bothered about climate issues. A lot of youth are bothered about gender-related issues, whether it is the gender inequality, if one were to look at it as a binary, but also issues related to LGBTQ. Now, these are all big issues, and these are affecting, maybe there are 250 to 300 million youth in this country. And how do you solve these problems? These are huge, huge challenges. But the good thing is that India is also in a phase, in my opinion, which we haven't seen for at least more than a millennium, which is more than 1,000 years. And that is, India is today growing at about 6.5 to 7% GDP per annum. While the GDP itself is not relevant for the progress of everyone in the country, what it does tell us is that, so I'll just give you the maths. So today the country spends 8% of its GDP on development, which means for the weaker sections, for the poorer sections of society. That amount today is about $350 billion. In another 20, 25 years, by the time India reaches 100, which is 2047, we will be a $25 trillion economy. And if the country spends only 8%, but it surely will spend more on development when it has more money, but even if it only spends 8%, that is a development spend of $2 trillion every year. By the way, $2 trillion was the size of the entire India's GDP just 10 years ago. So what I'm trying to tell you is that social agenda, development agenda will have $2 trillion available every year. And that is huge amount of money. And if you use that money well, we can make a difference to everybody in this country. And India can become a role model for the developing world. Of course, if we don't manage that money well, we will end up creating the most unequal country the world has ever seen. We are already the second fastest growing as far as inequality is concerned. And if we continue like this for another 20 years, we'll become number one on inequality. And everybody knows, even the rich people know that inequality is not good for anyone. Not only the poor, it's not good for the rich either. Inequality is the cause of all social evils in the world. So, but we have that opportunity. And I think that opportunity is going to last for the next maybe 25, 30 years, because we're not going to grow at that same percentage for forever and ever. And if we don't make that difference, then we would have made an unequal country. And then it becomes very difficult to, sort of bring it back and, undo all that damage. So I don't think there is a better time to be in the social sector than the next 25, 30 years. The real change in this country, the country's future, the country's population, everything. The biggest opportunity is sitting in front of us for the next 25, 30 years. So the opportunity is there, but we need to manage that opportunity. And if we don't manage it, we will create the most unequal country, and that will be a disaster, not just for India, but for the world. And if we succeed, then we will show the world what does it mean to be a vibrant, developing country that becomes a developed country. And it can become a model for so many countries across the world, especially in the global south, to be able to, sort of make a difference to themselves and their countries. So this requires a lot of managing. And that's really somewhere the idea of development management. So development management, very simply put, is two words. There's development and there is management. What is management? Management is anything you manage. You can manage a birthday party. You can manage an annual, college festival. You can manage an organization. You can manage a country. You can manage an NGO. You can manage a business. So management is something that is all pervasive. People, when they say management, they only think of business management. But management actually is management of anything, right? I mean, even if you had to organize a wedding, there is a lot of management that happens. So we must first realize that management is a verb. It's not a proper noun. It's not only meant for business. It is meant for anything. And the second thing one will realize very, very quickly is that you cannot manage an NGO the way you manage a bank or an IT company. And similarly, you cannot run the government the way you run a business. And vice versa. You can't run a business the way you run a government. Because each of these three pillars of society, which is Samaj, Sarkar, and Bazaar, I hope all of you understand that. So the state, the markets, and civil society. These are the three critical pillars for a vibrant society. And imagine this is like a stool with three legs. Even if one of those legs is not strong, we will create a imbalanced country. So for a vibrant country, you need a strong government, a good government, you need a vibrant business ecosystem, and you need a very solid civil society. And unless that is there, you will create a very unequal world. And each of these require very, very different types of management. And we'll come to that in more detail. But I want to first start and take you back to where did business management start? Because then you'll start realizing why business management has its positives, has its negatives, what are its origins. Just think about it. Where do you think, or when do you think business management originated? So business management actually originated somewhere around 1880. 1880 were the early programs on management that were started. They were bachelor level programs. In 1900 was when the first MBA program was run at Harvard Business School and at Wharton. So they always compete on who started the MBA program first in the world, but more or less these two colleges started in 1900. 1900 was towards the later part of the Industrial Revolution. I hope all of you have heard of the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution has resulted in a huge change in how human beings live. It completely changed the world for all of us. So many things we take for granted were all invented during the Industrial Revolution, whether it is telephone lines, whether it is electricity, whether it is uh, trains, railway engines and trains, so many things, the motor vehicle that we use, these were all invented during the Industrial Revolution. And that completely changed the way the world lives. And today, the world is seeing economic prosperity across the world that it has never ever seen in its recorded history. Now, if you go back to the Industrial Revolution and see what are the good things about the Industrial Revolution and what are the bad things about Industrial Revolution. So Industrial Revolution was really an engineering story. It was engineers who created lots of products, lots of ideas, lots of new ways of uh, all of us living lives, consuming things, and so on and so forth. So mass production, that was the whole idea of the Industrial Revolution. And, there were new machines, there were a lot of new factories, and suddenly you could produce, maybe if you were making, I don't know, let's say you were making scissors or something like that in the past. You might be making one scissor every 3 days or something like that. But once you put it on a production shop floor, which means, I don't know if you see in a production line, one action is done in the first step, second action is done in the second, third is done on the third. It's like a production line, tuck, 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 okay, it goes to the other end. And at the other end, you get a scissors. Now, once you put it in a production line, earlier you could produce one scissor in 3 days. Now you probably produce 300 scissors in one day. So that's the kind of change that it created. So suddenly everything started changing, right? So suddenly businesses started becoming big. The concept of a business itself changed. Now I'm producing more goods that I can sell in my neighborhood. So I have to sell it much further. I have to keep inventory. I need working capital because I need money to produce enough. By the time I sell, it'll take a little time. But mass production, that was the big thing that happened in the Industrial Revolution. And today, all of you, whatever you consume, whether it is the chips or the water or the clothes or the shoes or the perfumes or the deodorants or whatever is now produced in large quantities. And that's a result of the Industrial Revolution. And that completely made, huge improvements in transportation. There were huge technological innovations, like I told you, from telephones to aircrafts to trains to cars to all that happened. Of course, and because of that, because there were factories, that was the beginning of the rise of modern cities. So industrialization led to the growth of towns and cities because a lot of economic activities were happening there and away from agriculture. So yeah, huge progress happened, huge change happened. Humankind has benefited immensely from the Industrial Revolution. But with almost every good thing, there are some bad things also that happen. And there were several bad things about the Industrial Revolution. So obviously, capitalism started gaining a lot more traction because the businesses made a lot of money and the business owners made money while the labor never made money. So the labor got exploited. In the early stages, even, there was a lot of child labor because they were being exploited. So a lot of exploitation of labor happened. People used to be made to work very long hours because suddenly you could produce so much. If you work for 2 more hours, we'll produce another 20 scissors. So, that sort of a thing happened. Obviously, they wanted to pay lower and lower wages because they can make higher and higher margins for the owners who wanted to. So a lot of harsh working conditions happened. A lot of raw material was required for all this work. And for that raw material, slowly we started exploiting our planet, right? So increasingly we started consuming so much, and to help for that consumption, there was a lot of exploiting of whether it was oil, whether it is fossil fuels, whether it is water, and so on and so forth. And of course, as part of that, there was a lot of environmental pollution also that happened, right? In the initial phases, nobody cared. Even now, a lot of people don't care. The regulators try and force things to make sure you don't pollute our underground water, you don't pollute our lakes and rivers, you protect our mountains and forests, and so on and so forth. But a lot of this pollution from the industry started in that industrial revolution. And everything was a production line. So somewhere the idea of humanity went off and human beings became resources. So human beings were basically workers in a factory. So you would have done problems in your school. If 5 people can do a work in 2 days, in how many days will 10 people do the same work, kind of things you will hear in school. Basically, human beings then became just like machines. And humanity started going out of the way we looked at human beings. Even today, in most corporates, even in NGOs, they'll call the department that deals with people as human resource manager, right? So over time, we lost that idea of humanness in the way we manage. So a lot of original business management was based on that. How do you produce very high efficiency, high productivity, high volumes, high margins, high profits, and not worrying too much about, the people and how you deal with people, how people are different, how people have different aspirations and expectations. And of course, they exploited race, they exploited caste, they exploited all sorts of things during that whole phase. The reason I'm saying all that is that businesses became businesses the way they are today at the end of the Industrial Revolution. I told you the MBA started in 1900, and the way to manage became very industrial. And we don't even realize how much industrialization has come into our lives. We, even in the language, we use, low hanging fruits and, quick impact and value for money in our own language when we're speaking to friends and things like that. But these are all very industrial sort of ideas that came in. And thereby, a lot of it was driven by standardization, by efficiency maximization. And as capitalism came in, on shareholder value. So what you'll realize is that increasingly, and there's a book by Thomas Piketty on capital in the 21st century, where he looked at data over the last 200 years, and he said the people who have the capital have been becoming richer and richer and richer and richer, and the labor has become poorer and poorer and poorer and poorer. So the inequality also started, somewhere in that. Now, business management, so work for businesses very well because the business objective is not necessarily, okay, let me put it differently. The objective of the business is to maximize value for the shareholders of the company or the owners of that company. So that's how businesses will always work. While doing that, they will standardize. They will work on efficiency metrics and productivity metrics and so on and so forth. And they'll do anything within the law. Obviously, some will violate the law also. So if the government says you're allowed to pollute not more than whatever 8% of your pollutants should go out into the river, they'll happily go up to 8%. Not saying that even at 8%, I should not, sort of pollute the rivers, but they'll say, but government mein utna hi bola, to I'm doing fine as long as I stay within that. So their objectives are very different. So you'll realize that the purpose for which business exists is very different from the purpose for which the social sector exists. And therein starts the difference of thereby how do you manage a social sector has to be very different from how do you manage a business. Because here you're managing for equity, equality. There you're managing for efficiency, productivity, correct? So thereby what do you do? Here you create competition. Because I want to win market share, I want my competitor to lose so that I can win. Whereas in our work, in the sector, you don't want anyone to lose. It has to be win-win. So we talk about more collaboration. How do we collaborate? If you don't collaborate, then we'll never succeed. Whereas in the business, they claim they do collaboration and all that, but their holy grail is competition. So when I worked in the corporate days long back, I got bonuses if I made my company do better than the other company, which means the other company did badly. So that's at a starting point. If I go on to look at, other, if you like, axioms, which I call, which define development management. So collaboration is one. The second is participation. So in the world of business, the business does something which either the customer cannot do or prefers not to do, and instead prefers to pay money to the business. And thereby, the business will not involve the customer in that process, because if the customer knows how to produce what I produce, if you know how to make an Apple phone at home, Apple will go out of business. So they'll always, or if you know how to make Coca-Cola at home, it's a simple sweetened water. If you know how to make it at home, Coca-Cola will go out of business. But today, Coca-Cola sells in 200 countries around the world and things like that. So the business is run on what is called, and you can call it secret sauce. They'll very nicely call it unique selling propositions and core competence and things like that. Whereas in the sector, you don't want anything to be a secret. If you have created something, you want it to be available to the communities, right? That's how change will happen. That's how scale will happen. So how do you have participation of the communities in the work that you do is a very different way of managing when you run a business, which doesn't really bring customers inside the offices of the business. In the sector, we need to be far more inclusive. We cannot be leaving certain sections of the society out of this process. In the world of business, they will see where does my maximum profit come, and I will concentrate on those areas. I don't then care about the others. Whereas in our space, we have to be inclusive. So there it is more exclusive. In the world of the sector, the social work is far more inclusive. So then how does management be very different when you have to think inclusiveness in managing people, in managing research, in managing interventions, in doing whatever you do? In the social sector, I have to have what I call a development mindset. In the world of business, I'm only bothered about short-term, immediate goals. Quarter se quarter tak, am I making money? Am I making profits? Long-term shareholder value, they talk about it, but the bonus for the executives are paid on that year's profits. And thereby, I might be, producing something and causing a huge inequality in the world. But that I don't care, because I am only targeting this rich group of customers, and that's all that matters to me. Whereas in our sector, I can't be solving, let's say, for school education, but then, hitting the children while to make them get marks and then make bad adults of them. So we have to think much more long term. We have to think much more of the side effects of the work that we do. And thereby that mindset of development, what is a shared idea of a good society? And the world has defined that a good society is just, equitable, humane, and sustainable. So anything we do has to meet those four, and you can add more, sort of variables to that. But those kind of fundamental universal human values, you cannot compromise. So The social sector runs on principles of universal human values. So there are a lot of values associated. Whereas in the world of business, it's about following the laws of the land. And as long as you're following the laws of the land, you can do whatever you want. Then, of course, in the sector where we work in the social sector, so many of you are from the sector, we are working for, let's say, a certain section of society. And more often than not, that section of society is a weaker section of society. Whereas in the world of business, the customer is paying for your product, and thereby the customer is king, they'll say, in the world of business. And if you do something wrong, then the customer will stop buying your products, the customer will not pay you, and so on and so forth. So the person who is benefiting is also got the control over that organization. Whereas in our work, very rarely is the community able to dictate either to the NGO or the NGO to the funder what needs to be done. And thereby, we have to do it out of our own integrity. Sometimes even the communities may not know whether what I'm doing is actually good or bad. So in the world of business, they don't care. If the customer doesn't know, it's their problem. In our case, because you are representing the weakest sections of society, we have to have a very inherent integrity in the choices that we make. And thereby, how does management change will be very, very different. And there are several more, right? Systems thinking. In the world of business, it's all closed systems. My customer, my competitor, my partners, my vendors, my suppliers, my distribution chain, that closed system I manage. Whereas in the social sector, it's all open systems. When I work on school education, I know that school education is not only affected by textbooks, teachers, school management committees, etc., but is also affected by nutrition. It's also affected by weather patterns. It is affected by gender. It's affected by domestic violence. So many things we have to think about. So we have to think of a very open architecture when we do systems thinking in this sector. So many axioms which make development management fundamentally different from business management. And the other aspect of development management that's very critical is the person involved. So the development management professional has to be far different and maybe even far superior to a business management professional, because the first thing is you work on the most complex problem that society is trying to solve. Selling Coca-Cola is not a complex problem. Selling an iPhone is not a complex problem. Making a difference to the lives of girls, making a difference to people who are disabled, making a difference to people who don't have water, etc., are far more complex because they are all interlinked, they are very layered. So they are very, very complex problems. So your ability to solve complex problems is a very important quality as a development management professional. The second is that you will never ever know what does it mean to be a member of that community. You know, Harsh Mandar used to say in the ISDM class that you as a social worker, even if you're a woman, will never know what it feels like to be that girl who's going to sleep on the pavement in Bombay, not knowing whether she's going to wake up safe. And thereby, how do you make decisions? You have to have incredible humility to first realize you don't know much. And thereby, you have to listen. Thereby, you have to involve. Thereby, your decisions could be horribly wrong if you don't have participatory processes and inclusive processes. So you as an individual have to realize what are your lived experiences, what could be your biases, and what could be your ideas of what is a good society, and try and be able to keep that aside and work towards a shared idea of what's a good society. So a lot of individual related things, a lot of fundamental value related things, and a lot of functional related things that are very, very different in when you do development management and when you do business management. There are many things you can adopt from business management, how to look at a balance sheet, how to do cash flows. So things like that you can adopt. There are some things you can adapt from business management, how to do performance appraisal. Some core you can take from there, but then you have to add values, you have to add community, and you can create your own thing. So you can adapt something when you come to development management. Some things are totally unique to the development management space. So open systems thinking, or volunteer management, or fundraising, uh, or participatory processes in development, etc., etc., are very unique. So when we build the space of management, we have to be able to say, what can I adopt? What can I adapt? And what do I need to think newly? And for that, you have to have that fundamental grounding in understanding the complex nature of social change, a deep understanding of what are your own lived values, a good understanding of what are universal human values, and how do you then bring all that into the management choices that you make. Since I'm talking without listening, I just want to get some feedback from the people who are listening. And if you can just type and say, you know, you're with me, yes, can you go slow, or no, you're doing fine. Could I just get some responses on the chat, please? Great. Good, good, good. That's really good. Thank you, Vikas, Deepak, all of you for giving feedback. Pramod, that helps me. Okay, we'll continue. Um, so let me move from, an understanding of development management to maybe, the careers and opportunities in in development management. Okay. So firstly, I think there has never been a better time to be in the social sector. In the next 30 years, the social sector is going to be a extremely vibrant, happening, and very big space, because I told you we're going to go from about $350 billion to about $2 trillion over the next 20 years. So lots of money is going to come into the sector. A lot of it will be spent by the government, but when government spends the money, that percolates into the social sector and so on and so forth, and communities and national livelihood missions, etc., etc. So huge opportunity. But like I told you, there are, okay, come back. There are three types of people that broadly the social sector requires. Uh, the first is the sector needs a lot of people who are technical experts at social work. And who are those people? Those are the people who have done MSWs in their life. Right? So if you studied at Tata Institute of Social Science or Ambedkar or Jamia or wherever, and done social work, masters in social work, then you become technically qualified, because you know how to work with communities, you know how to do village mapping, you know how to do counseling, you know how to do, research with the participants on the field, you know how to do field work and so on and so forth. Then, so they are like the engineers in the world of business, the MSWs. Then there are people who are the scientists, who are inventing new things, who are studying why is it this way, how can we change it, what can be better, etc. And those are the people who are typically who come from a background of MA in development studies. So MA in development studies, you will study sociology of development, anthropology of development, philosophy of development, etc., etc. And you'll be very, very knowledgeable about why development is required, how does development happen, what needs to change for good development, etc., etc. And their work feeds into what the engineers do. And then the third category, so in the world of business, those are the scientists and researchers and people like that. And the third category is the development management professionals. The development management professionals are people who understand the social sector, but their main focus is scaling, building organizations, creating impact at scale, managing processes, money, people, technology, data, etc., while understanding the humane side of work that needs to be done. And we always say that to work in the social sector, you need to use your head, heart, and hand. Most of the work you do in the world of business, the heart doesn't matter. The head and the hand are more important. Whereas in the social sector, all three become very critical. So the third pillar of that, so social workers, social scientists, MA Dev, and development management professionals, who are like the MBAs in the world of business. This piece, the people who build the organizations, lead large programs, know how to think strategically, build partnerships, do things at scale, etc. Uh, there has not been any investment in this world. Whereas if you see the world of business, the investment in management has been huge. If you see the government, this whole space of public administration. So if you want to go into government administration, then you do a master's in public administration. Is again very, very popular. And it goes back since 1880 is when the first masters in public administration program started at the Woodrow Wilson College. 1900 is when MBA started. Development management has been ignored because somewhere the sector used to always say that management is the cause of all the social problems. So don't tell me that management will now solve the problems in the social sector. And that's a wrong notion because management is, like I told you, a common noun. It's not only business management that is management.
Yeah.
Varsha, if you can mute. Yeah. So this whole development management space, in my opinion, is going to be a really big booming space in the next 2 to 3 decades. And you need them because if you don't have them, you will end up with the way it is today. Today, the country is filled with mini micro NGOs across the country. There are only 19 organizations that even have a 100 crore budget. 100 crore today in the country is nothing. The largest NGO in this country reaches about 38 million people. Country of 1.4 billion people, 38 million people. Just to give you a contrast, Unilever products, right? Fair and Lovely, vagera, vagera, reaches 800 million people every year. We need NGOs which can reach 800 million people, right? And be able to do things at scale. How do you make a difference to the school education system, to the youth who need jobs, to climate that's going, in a very, very bad direction and so on and so forth. So I honestly think that this combination of social workers, social scientists, and development managers is critical for the sector to be able to grow. It has not been able to grow because we only work out of passion. We work from our heart. We work very hard. We want our work to speak, but we have not invested in, and I say this, right? We've become jhola walas and we should now become laptop walas. We have to use the latest technology. How do you use AI for better development work, for better school education, for better understanding of women's safety and whatever else? So I think this is the bit that will make a huge difference over the next 20, 30 years. And of course, I'm hoping that because of the development management professionals, organization will suddenly start changing. And I told you a lot of money is going to come into the sector. Unless we know how to manage that money, how to invest that in the development processes, building resilient organizations, we will fail very, very miserably. So I'm of the view that in the next 10, 20, 25 years, development management will be a big, big, big thing in the social sector, and not the MBA kind of management, but a management that is tailored for the social sector, which is based on the heart, head, and hand, which is based on ideas of a just, equitable, humane, and sustainable society. So I think it's going to be huge in terms of the next 25, 30 years, probably the time that all of you are going to be working. Of course, you can work in any of these spaces. And my own view is it's not only NGOs that you can work in. Of course, you can work in NGOs where you're designing programs, scaling programs, leading organizations, focusing on communication, talent management, processes, fundraising, working capital management. So many new areas that need to be worked on. You could also be working in CSRs and corporate foundations. Today, CSRs are something a little over 30,000 crores, and they're the fastest growing private philanthropy in the country. They're still small, it's about 25, 30%, but it's going to become huge because if companies make profit, they have to spend on CSR, right? So as the economy is growing, so I think CSRs and corporate foundations, many have started realizing, but still many are run by their HR department or marketing department. I feel that in the next 5, 10, 15 years, they will get more and more professionals and development management professionals to come into those spaces. You can be in the social enterprise space. Social enterprise here I'm defining as for profit, but with a primary objective of making a difference to society and the planet. So you could be running social enterprise, you could be setting up your own social enterprises, you could be in the space of, new impact finance management. So things like development bonds, blended finance, outcome-based finance. There are a lot of new areas that are coming up in finance, in people management, in organization management, in technology, data for good, AI for good. These are all very, very big areas. You don't need to be an AI expert, but you need to know how you can leverage AI for having great impact. And that's what a development management professional will do. The government will require a lot of people who are development management professionals. One of the things ISDM is doing is to work with the government to take development management inside the government. Today, government is basically a lot of very good bureaucrats who pass orders, but after that, at the state and the district level, very often it's just implementing policies. There is no management. How do you involve communities? How do you look at data? How do you get, sort of feedback and be a reflective practitioner to change things as things are going on? So you could be in the government, you could be in CSR, you can be in not-for-profits. There's a question, let me just see that. Yeah, correct. So if you ask me, for a lot of these roles, you will need to understand development management, which means you should understand how does social change happen, how do interventions get designed, how do how do how does society operate, how does society have various diverse aspirations in what they want to do, and parallelly be able to manage money, manage people, manage processes, manage technology. So the careers, if you ask me, most people in development management will go either into program management, into communication, into talent management, into fundraising, into strategy and partnerships, into government relationships, etc., etc. And my own view, and I could be a little prejudiced here, but if I take the MBA world, I find that MBAs are the ones who effectively become CEOs of organizations as time goes on. In the past, it used to be the engineers. I think the social sector will also see a big mushrooming of development management professionals who will go on to become future program leads, project leads, CEOs of organizations. I think we'll see a lot of people setting up their own organizations and people wanting to invest in development management professionals who can build those organizations. So areas, like I said, finance, strategy, technology, communication, fundraising, advocacy, government work, etc., etc. And of course, there'll be people who will be, and you can work in grassroots organizations, you can work in the, intermediary organizations, you can work in fundraising and philanthropic, or yeah, even philanthropic organizations need development management professionals who can say, how to invest your money, where to give your money, how to give your money, when to give your money, what do you give besides money. So you could even be working in that entire chain from grassroots organizations all the way to check writing and philanthropic organizations. Yeah, I hope I'm giving you a sense of, I gave you a sense of why development management is important and a little sense of what is development management and a little sense of what are, what is the future going to look for in the sector and where does development management fit and what are the kind of jobs that, one would likely to see in the social sector. I want to again stop here and, I'm feeling people might have a lot of questions and we should switch to now an interactive mode. If the admin can just
Yeah.
tell people how to, yeah.
Yeah, you can unmute as well. Anyone can unmute themselves and talk. And you can also write on the chat box.
There is a question here, as a Gandhi Fellow from Piramal Foundation, how to build career in development. So, the fellowships in our country are really an amazing thing that has happened over the last 10, 20 years, where these organizations, whether it is Teach for India, Gandhi Fellowship, SBI Fellowship, vagera, vagera, have done an amazing job of giving an opportunity for youngsters coming out of most probably college to understand what is happening in the social sector. Because our education system has not done that job at all. I don't think when you come out of a graduate program, you know what are the challenges this country is facing. What are issues of caste? What are issues of religion? What are issues of gender? What are issues of livelihood? Nothing. Whereas when you become a fellow, and because a lot of youth are naturally inclined to work in meaningful, purposeful spaces. So these fellowships are very attractive. So today there are 50, 60,000 youngsters who are in some fellowship or the other. And if you're a Gandhi fellow, Deepak, you would know that you will spend 2 years in the community. I know as part of your program, you spend a month just living without money with the community, understanding what does it mean to be in that space, seeing the challenges that they go through. So what I feel that the fellowships do, and I could be wrong, but this is my view, does a great job of giving you a deep immersion in the social sector, in the communities, in the country. Okay. Now, what at the end of it, what happens is you, of course, understand a reasonable amount of what the schooling system is, who are the key players in the schooling system, what is the role of a head teacher, and so on and so forth. But now, if you want to build a career in the social sector, that will only get you an entry level job. Now you need to you have to study because this is not a space you can wing it. I mean, Gandhi Fellowship, Teach for India, you would have been given some training program, you will have refreshers and you'll go back. But that's at a very operating level. But you must understand, like in an MBA program, they're likely to teach you, you will have to understand many aspects of the organization. You have a good understanding of education, you need to understand malnutrition, you need to understand reproductive health, you need to understand gender. So first level is understanding the complex nature of society in far greater depth. And how does the state, market, and society work? Because when any change happens, it's an intersection. You would have seen it very like that. You would have seen government has a role to play, community has a role to play, private sector has a role to play. So you must study. So I always say to, youngsters coming from the Gandhi Fellowship and all that, and normally they want to work because they've just finished a fellowship. So you might work for 1 or 2 years and that's very good. But before it's too late, you must study. You must do a program. Maybe if development management interests you, then you should come and study in development management. If you want to go into the social work technical space, then you should go study an MSW. If you want to be more in the thinking, strategizing phase, not even strategy, thinking, ideating phase, then maybe you should go into MA Dev study. But my advice to you is work for 1 or 2 years, but do study before it's too late because it will only take you to the lower levels of an organization. If you want to reach senior levels in the organization, the Gandhi Fellowship will not be enough. How can we start our career as a fresher in the development sector? Is there any specific interest area for particular required? Or we should start on random basis? So that's a very good question. And now, we've seen 9 batches come to ISDM. So we have youth coming from all over the country. So I have a very good sense of what do youngsters look for, what are their aspirations and all that. And I find that there are 3-4 types of people who start the sector. And I don't know what you might be, but you might be one of them. So the first is a person who's had a life experience and thereby feels that mujhe isi mein kaam karna hai. I lost my, close friend to, let's say, mental health, suicide or something like that. I want to work in the mental health space. Somebody else says, my brother was a special needs person and I had to live throughout. So I want to do something in the special needs space. Or it might be I benefited from very good school education, so I want to work in the school education. So there are some youngsters, by the time they are graduating, they're very, very strong about what they want to do. And thereby they choose to work in that space. But sometimes when they come to places like ISDM, you come there saying, I want to work in school education. But after that, you realize, oh my God, there are so many other issues. And there's nobody working in those spaces. Maybe I should work in climate change, or maybe I should work in LGBTQ, or maybe I should work in, epidemics or something like that. So the first is a person who knows. So in which case you start in that direction. But be open to different ways of looking at it. The second is people who come and say, I have 3, 4 areas of interest. I like gender, I like education, I want to work in climate. I don't know which is an area. Then the best way to do is to start in one of those areas or study again. Like I said, people come to ISDM with those kind of things and then go out saying, no, no, now I know that what I really, my strengths are and what I'm passionate about is this specific area. But if you're starting without studying, then go into one of those 2, 3 areas or volunteer in all those 2, 3 areas because there's no better way to understand than volunteering. But if you need money and you need a job, then start as a job and start in one area where you feel, this could be of interest to you. So it could be 3 areas and it depends on where you end up. And you might like that area and you might then build a whole career on that area. The third category is somebody who मुझे पता है कि मेरे को corporate में नहीं जाना है. And then I'm totally open, मुझे पता नहीं है क्या करना है, etc. Right? So then again, some of these fellowships are very good to do. And if you're already a fellow, then the next thing is to start working in some area which are broadly of your interest. It could be geographical, it could be the community of Ram, it could be an area that you're interested. But you start. But again, if you can volunteer, there is no better way to do it than volunteer. Of course, listen to talks, meet people who are working in different areas, get their inputs, listen to, and you'll start realizing that what is it that ticks within you? Because finally your heart has to engage. Otherwise, social sector cannot be meaningful unless your heart is able to engage. So those would be some different ideas. Is there a need after fellowship to do MSW? Um, well, yes, is my honest answer, because the fellowship gives you a very good immersion. The MSW builds a lot of tools and abilities to work in the community. So some of it you will have. But for example, let's say instead of MSW, if you were to do development management, then that's a completely new phase. A lot of that development management you wouldn't have got in a immersive fellowship. MSW, at least 30%, 40% of what you will do in an MSW, you would have got through the fellowship. So when you go for your MSW or you go for your PGP in development management, that experience is very valuable of having been a fellow. I find that fellows who come to ISDM to do the development management program benefit significantly because they understand the reality on the ground. They understand the different stakeholders. They understand the power structures that exist. So I would still recommend you to study, because if you don't study early stages, you'll be okay. But in the medium term, you will lose out. Please suggest few online programs which we can do to grow in the career after being in the sector for 2 decades, especially in the strategy and climate change. I'm not very familiar with online programs, but I think there are lots of online resources. So even if you come to the ISDM website, you'll find a lot of resources that are there, and and not just ISDM, there are many other places also. So I think if you go on to any of these online courses, right? So Coursera, edX, ISDM, I'm sure you'll find courses that are of interest to you very specifically. Some of it you may want to invest in some paid courses also, depending on how serious you are and what exactly you want to do. I'm not very familiar with the short-term online courses, but I know that there are many such courses. Sorry, Vikram, I don't have a better answer than that for you, but yeah. Ajinkya, with over 6 years of experience in socio-political consulting, I aim to build a panchayat-centric ecosystem to provide understanding of basic technology for the incubation centers for small funding to start our work. They prefer tech-centric or growth-centric or logistic specific agenda, any specific programs can help with the obviously, this is a very important question. And the good news is that this area of how to use technology for social progress, so, tech for good, is becoming a very big space in the country. Maybe early stages, but it's becoming very big. I know a lot of tech companies in Bangalore only want to invest in tech for good. They want something to do with technology. Otherwise, they won't give money, which I think is lopsided in some ways. I mean, areas like gender and all need a lot of money. But for somebody like you, there are a lot of tech companies, and Bangalore is the place, by the way, for these kind of things. So there are, accelerators like the Nudge Institute. I think IIM Bangalore has an NSR cell. And then there are many other investors like Will Grow. There are a lot of, those are for-profit investors, so they're looking for return. So there are several people, and that space is increasing very rapidly. So if I were you, I would recommend you to follow some of the influencers in this space, the Nikhil Kamats of the world, and listen to people like that. Listen to the Mindtree people, and you'll hear where the money is, where the ideas are, and who you should be talking to.